Today we're with one and only Alexander Massialas, one of the most decorated foil fencers in the United States and in the US history, to be honest. You are four-time Olympians. You won silver medal at the Olympics in Rio and bronze at a team event. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
I just want to make sure I don't miss anything. You're world champion, NCAA champion, and you have so many like medals and titles that I think the list is very long. Also, your father is a very famous USA coach. We also three-time Olympian, if I'm not wrong. Okay, so we got this correct. And your sister also fenced, and she went to college with fencing. You graduated Stanford, and now you're head coach at Stanford, but also a very, very competitive athlete. So honestly, every time I think of you, I remember the first time we met. You were very young. I don't know if you remember. We were coaching with Chris an event that your dad, I don't know if he organized or he was hiring coaches. I mean, referees. I don't remember.
We were refereeing.
Yeah, we were refereeing.
We stayed at your house, actually.
No,
And we
I
ate
remember that.
steak.
That's what I tell everyone that knows the two of you and me, especially like people like Sophia. I was like, I've known Chris and Setsi before. Like I was like 5 or 6 years old or something. I have like a distinct memory of you guys and Chris's father coming over and preparing for the event because he was hosting events at like the Kezar Stadium in San Francisco. Yes. And that's always going to be seared into my memory.
And I do remember that was the first time when you guys were making steak. And I remember you and your sister asked your mom to make it medium rare. Was that the case? And we were like,
shocked.
We were shocked. In Europe, we don't need like bloody, like a little bloody. I was like, what is happening here? And then later on, do you know how we eat our steak?
Well
medium
done.
Medium rare. Now.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. My dad is the grill. He's the grill master in our family. And he cooks things only rare or like blue. So like it's been a while, so maybe you don't remember, but that cow was basically mooing when you still ate it.
No, I know.
Clearly
I think my father was in shock, and he was like, "How can I eat just the end of what we're being served here?" But we remember we went to this nice buffet as well, the one that we have to cook on the foil, and you make your own soup, your own dish. Now that's also planted in my memory from back in the day.
But that for us was a cultural shock because I just came to the United States. Chris was there already 6 months or whatever. So everything was like, wow, and now it's like normal. So now when I ask my mom, do you want the rare? She's like, who eats that? And I'm like, we were there.
We know one person.
We know one person that started the thing with us. And so let's start with the questions. The questions are basically going to be, of course, about your fencing, but also your life and everything else. And if something is repeating, we can skip whatever you feel. We're open to anything. So my main question will be for you. When you were younger, did you have that feeling that you're going to make it big into fencing, that you're going to be like, I don't know, like a big star, let's say?
Yeah, I mean, from a young age, I always thought that I could be good. Ultimately, my goal was to make the Olympic team and become an Olympic champion because from a very, very young age, before I started fencing even, I was obsessed with the Olympics and not necessarily fencing. I just remember telling my dad, hey, I want to go to the Olympics. I don't care if it's fencing or whatever, but it's going to be, I want to be an Olympian because of all the stories my dad taught me, told me about the Olympic Village, told me about the Olympic movement, what it means to, be a part of something that's such a unique event that kind of uses the sports to bring the world together in a way, something that's tied both to, his Olympic history, but even our history as, in our culture being Greek, that's where the ancient Olympic, the games were invented. So for me, it was something that's really a goal of mine from a young age. And when I started fencing, yes, I had that goal, but ultimately it was about just enjoying the sport, enjoying the process. I did fencing just as seriously as I did every other sport at that age, whether it was basketball, soccer, skiing, swimming, but I guess eventually there came a time where I thought I could really do something about it. And that's really the inspiration was really in 2008, the Olympics there. In 2004, I'd gone to Athens because of family, watched Olympic Games. I saw Marielle win the first ever gold medal for the US. And then, that was really great, but I was 10 years old, so even though it was really
Yeah.
inspirational, I never really thought too hard about like when I could make a run for the Olympics, when the timing would line up. But when I saw Garrick, my teammate who's 4 years older than me, competing in the Beijing Olympics as an 18-year-old, being 14 at the time, that was something that was really inspirational because I was sitting there watching him. And for me, I was like, well, I'm going to be 18 in 4 years. And I feel like I was doing all the similar things that Garrick was doing when he was 14. So there's no reason if I put a lot of effort in, if I try really hard, if I don't slack off, that I could potentially be in that position 4 years down the line. So I think that was a real turning point for me as far as like how and when I started changing the way I tackle fencing from a mental standpoint.
Yeah, so you almost like kind of live with the idea that I will be Olympian from your age in a way. And I
Well,
think
yeah,
it's
I
almost like
wanted to
manifesting
be.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I wanted to be, but I also never let that be the end all be all because, for me, it was all about this is the big goal in the future, but I have all these small goals that I need to check off if I want to get there. And you can't skip any of the process if you want to get to that ultimate goal. There are no shortcuts. So it was always about like it was never about like, am I on track? Am I gonna do this? Blah blah blah. It was more like, oh, let me just do these goals first, and ultimately those goals will lead me to be on the Olympic team one day.
So stick to the process in one way or another. Because again, from what you're saying, is like it comes down to since you were young, your father kind of planted also this visualization in you where I can see this now. I can kind of look forward to something again down the road that would really, it's really helpful for a lot of the young athletes too, to kind of have a really big picture of where you have to go and then really put down the work in the process.
Yeah, it was interesting because like I felt very lucky that although I had this goal way down the line, it never felt like that was something I was truly focused on, at least at a young age, right? There was no pressure to try to make Olympic team. My parents, they just wanted me to enjoy the sport
Hmm.
because it brought my dad so much, even regardless of the Olympics, it brought him so much joy and so many lessons that they just wanted me to take part in the process. And whatever the results are, they're going to be proud no matter what. But it is also helpful, at the same time, having someone with that experience who knows what it means and what it takes to get there to be guiding me through the process without putting that pressure on. Just being like, hey, this is our goal for this year. This is our goal for this year. If it all lines up, then
Hmm.
you have a shot. But, it was always going to be a long shot for an 18-year-old to make the Olympic team. So there was no pressure, put on me in any way.
But I feel I speak about this in a lot of the videos about the healthy mindset for athletes and also the parents not to put that pressure for the kids because being at that level it's a very long journey. And as we say, you're gonna lose more than you're gonna win. Period. And then you got to be okay with that. And there's always this like quotes like I either learn or I either win. It's not a loss because the loss is this negative kind of feeling for everybody. And I always tell athletes like I don't want you to kind of have that unhealthy relationship with the sport, with competing and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm gonna cry again because I'm gonna lose and all this kind of thing. So I think that's so important that they have implanted this in you. So you almost kind of have build this healthy environment for yourself in your mental health because of your parents. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Do you train the same way you train and the same way you compete? Like, is it more intense at training? It's like, I'm very curious, like the intensity you put on yourself. Like, let's say you go to the cup and say, today I'm not losing a point, or what it is when you train.
I would say my training intensity is actually lower than my competition. Now the volume might be higher, right? We might be fencing more bouts,
Hmm.
but the intensity, you can never match competition intensity in practice. It's just impossible. Like your mind, if you're a top athlete, just goes to another place when you're competing. And, even if you think you're giving 100% in practice, like the top athletes have some kind of drive or will to go surpass that when they're competing. So I wouldn't say I'm going 100% in practice every day as far as like intensity is concerned to start with. But even if I did, I just don't think I could match the intensity that I have in competition because no matter what, it's just gonna elevate when I get there just
Because you
through
push the limit on tournaments to see
yeah, pure nature and like
what else can be done in a way.
I'm not even trying to necessarily push a limit, it just comes inherently at
I
that
see.
point. So, but what I will say is, you know, even though the intensity is not as high when we're at practice, it's very thoughtful and methodical, right? As you guys said, and something that's been taught to me throughout the course of my career has always been, you learn more from failure than you do victory, right? If you win, it means pretty much all the stuff that's going right went right. Like there's not
Mm-hmm.
really much to learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you lose, clearly that means that there's something to work on. And so my practices have always been gauged, especially because a lot of the people I've practiced with historically have not been on the same level as me skill wise. Has always been like, okay, well, if I fence this person, how do I fence to their level, and how do I, you know, work on things that I'm not good at, as well as work on things that kind of, you know, I might be good at, but it matches with what they're good at. And so it makes it more difficult for me to execute what I want to do. So all my training, basically most of my life, has been about limiting myself in certain ways so I can grow in the places that I am not as strong at. And that's kind of why I think I've had such a long career and been able to train with so many different training partners and be successful through and through because, you know, for the most part, when I'm at the fencing club, I'm training with, you know, high school kids, even younger to a certain extent. Yes, I had a few training partners throughout the years that were older, people like James Davis and Chase Emmer and stuff like that. But for the most part, you know, 85% of the people I'm fencing are not even close to a level as
Yeah.
I am. And you always have to find ways to gain something from fencing with people who are lower level. And that's why I tell everyone, you know, you don't need to be fencing with the best training partners to get better. You need to fence with best training partners in the sense that they're going to be there and push you. It doesn't necessarily mean their skill level has to be the highest, but they need to be there and putting in 100% effort so that you can find a way to get something from that training session.
We had this conversation with you. It was maybe a year ago or something at ANAC we met, and I was like, "Hey, how's it going?" and whatever, you know. And then we are talking about training, and I remember you said that to me, and it sticks to this day. And I talk to the kids at the club a lot. You said, "I've always, for the most part, you know, when Garrick is not there, Lee's not, you know, sometimes your training partners are not with you to train daily. You always said, I train for the most part with kids who are younger, and they're not at my level, but there's always something I'm training on and learning." And I always tell the kids at the club when they say, I fenced so and so and I'm done. What should I do next? And I'm like, if Alexander Massialas, with so many like awards and titles and stuff, one of the best, you know, foil fencers in the world, is able to train with like kids who are in high school, I'm sure there's a lot that you can do. And it's just funny how the kids are finding reasons not to train, even if it's with the same person. They're finding reasons and excuses like, who should I train next? It's like it's ridiculous to me.
So
Yeah.
that's a good example for, again, you know, how us as like club owners, coaches, we have these generations where generation can be very competitive, and there are 7 or 8 fencers, but then there is a generation, those 7, 8 fencers go to college, and now there is one fencer left that's 1 year younger.
Yeah.
He's like, oh no, what am I gonna do now? I have nobody to fence with. Let's find a different club.
Yeah.
In a way, not that it happened to us, but
Yeah.
in general, it's kind of what's happening throughout the whole country, throughout the world. And it's like, it's really, if this was the case with you, then you would have been all over the world in a way. So
Yeah.
there's got to be a way that we try to convince them too that when you go to practice, there's got to be a purpose there for you. You're not just doing 3 advances and a lunch and 3 retreats and a peri. It's this called PE. We got to see what's the purpose to accomplish something.
Well, it's almost more important in those senses, right? Because now you've taken away a lot of training partners. Now you have to put in more effort because there it's just a lot harder to get the returns you're looking for from practice. So if your mentality from, you know, from losing a bunch of training partners is like, oh, I'll train less because, you know, these kids aren't at my level, you're actually doing yourself a disservice,
Hmm.
in my opinion.
Yeah. So, Alex, you've had those insane comebacks. My question will be, what was going through your head when you're down and the whole world is watching you? You're thinking about the team. Do you cancel all this noise and you just focus on one thing at a time? I'm just curious, what is going through your head?
Yeah, I mean, like anytime you want to put a string of touches together, especially when you're making a comeback, you really have to focus on just one touch at a time. And that's always the way my dad brought it up to me, right? Like in those cases where I've made crazy comebacks, it's always been like, you know, whatever it is, you score the next touch, right? Like you can win every touch. You just need to score the next touch and then the next touch after that. But you don't think about anything down the line. You just think about what's it right there in your eyes right at that moment. And that's kind of how you tackle fencing in general too, right? I'm not looking way down the line during a competition to see who I might fence like 4 or 5 bouts later. It's really about I got to beat this person first before I can move on to the next person. And if you can just take that same kind of mentality and go touch by touch, that's kind of how you are able to make these comebacks because ultimately then you won't be focusing on the big picture, right? People freak out. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm losing 14-10, 14-8, whatever. They only need one touch. Well, if you're really focused on fencing, it's just like, let me just win this touch. Let me just win the next one, right? Like, and then you go until inevitably, like at some point they might score a touch, right? But if you handle that situation in the way of just handling it touch by touch, ultimately speaking, you might get there because you're not freaking about the larger picture. And I think the biggest thing is really looking for what change you need to make. Because if you're losing by a decent margin, there's definitely a problem that's coming up over and over again in that bout, right? And ultimately, it's about kind of eliminating that problem and finding a solution. And, I guess my most famous comeback was in the quarterfinals of the Olympics in Rio when I came back from a 14-8, 14-7
This
deficit
is
to
insane.
make the medal rounds, right? And it was against a fencer I'd never beaten before. I've gotten close I've lost 15-14 to him, but I'd never beaten in my career before. So it was actually a matchup that we thought was hard for me. And obviously it was a hard matchup for me in that moment. But I just remember that at, going into that 14-8 situation, my distance had been off by just a little bit, like the whole bout, and I hadn't fixed it all bout. And my dad was yelling at me, screaming. I was like, okay, I'm down 14-8, right? I have nothing better I clearly don't have the answer. I have nothing better to lose than to just try something, right? And so I just ended up elongating the distance a little bit, being a step further away on anything I want to do, whether it was attack, whether it's counter time, whether it's defense, whatever it was. I was like, I'm going to just make sure the distance is always a step extra. And all of a sudden, all the actions, it wasn't like all my actions changed. I was doing very much the same stuff I was doing earlier on in the bout, but now it was just touching every single time. Uh, Ultimately, like from there, he wasn't able to adapt and make a huge change that ended the bout. But that's kind of what I attribute it to is like the mentality of just taking things touch by touch. How do I fix the situation right now to score the next touch? And that happened to be distance, right? And then the touch after that, okay, well, now that I have the distance, I have to just be concerned about like A, the distance getting smaller again. And then B, I have basically 2 or 3 options of things I want to do, just making sure I choose the right one based on what I see. And once that happened, like the whole bout opened up and I was able to hit on attacks. I was able to hit on counter time actions. I was able to hit on some defensive actions. I mean, that's kind of how it all went. But it all starts from having the mentality of A, staying in control, and B, like never giving up. There's always about to be fenced, right? Until there's 15 touches on the scoreboard, it's anyone's game.
Yeah. Um, it's interesting. Sometimes we've had many cases where our athletes are leading 14-10 and losing the bout. And I feel like as much as you have advantage, sometimes you freak out by one point that you have to score. And you either think it's going to be the easiest point, and actually this is the hardest point you can score. And especially at the Olympics, it's completely different like mindset. But isn't it crazy? Like probably after the bout, you thought this was crazy. Like This was
Yeah.
completely
I mean, that's something they do think it's the easiest one, right? Because if you're winning 14-7, 14-8, right, you've done everything correct for the most part of the bout, and you expect it just to be like the rest of the bout. But it couldn't be further from the truth, right? Because when you have 14, your opponent has nothing to lose. And just think about what I just said, you know, from being down 14-8, I was willing to try things that, otherwise wasn't trying the rest of the bout because I thought it was too much of a risk or I didn't think it was going to work. And if you think about it from the flipped perspective, then it becomes obvious. Of course, the 15 touch is going to be the hardest, right? And that's always what my dad said is like when you get to, in a team event, when you get to 4 touches, you lock it down because that's so easy to give up 2 or 3 in a row. And now a 5-1 victory becomes a 5-4 victory. And you do enough of those in a
yeah.
bout, you're gonna keep the other team around when you don't want them to be, right?
Mhm.
And then in an individual event, if you get to 14, you just lock it down. Don't give them any hope, right? Because if you can lock down right away, then everyone's uh, much more stable. You're much more stable. You don't have to think about it much. But the
Mhm.
second you let the door open, give them 2 or 3 touches, even if you still have a good buffer, they've picked up a head of steam. You've started to second guess yourself. And, that's when bad things can happen. So it's really important when you get to 14, you just lock it down. Obviously, you can't always score the last touch, right? But my dad has always put an emphasis, whether it's in practice or in preparation, of you get to 13 and you score the 14th touch, you have to score the 15th touch right away. Because then like that's just the best way to handle things.
Yeah, and it's all back to mindset and mentality, like whose mentality is gonna kind of beat the opponent. Because I always tell the kids in the bout, there's always one is dominating, and this shifts throughout the points. You gotta make sure you're the one leading. You're not gonna win all the points, but make sure that you're kind of ahead. You kind of have a plan. What is the most challenging thing for you in life and sports in general? If you have anything that is challenging you.
I mean, everything is challenging, but I don't know. I think the most challenging is just finding balance. I've gone back and forth. I've fenced professionally where I've only focused on myself and my own fencing. I've fenced when I had to balance like a crazy, insane workload from, university when I was studying to be a mechanical engineer at the same time as training for the Olympics. Now I'm balancing being a full-time coach as well as fencing. And it's interesting because I look back on those days and there were times where I had a full, I was fully devoted to fencing and being professional. And those weren't necessarily the years I was fencing the best in my life. And I've also seen that with other fencers, right? Whether they take a gap year and to train for the Olympics or, they've just decided, hey, I'm going to try and be professional for a year. Oftentimes people don't realize that when you go fully professional and you're just thinking about fencing 24/7, A, it lends itself to a lot of burnout, but B, there's like too many hours in a day to be thinking about fencing 24/7. And so if you're not filling the other parts of your day with things that kind of drive you and kind of excite you in different ways, then it's really hard to kind of find balance when you do come to fencing because people fall into the trap of like, oh, if I'm not doing fencing related things, I'm just going to vegetate out, watch TV, play video games. And, I fell into that trap at times too during my career. But I realized the best years I had were when I balanced like this professional side of my fencing with some other passion of mine or something I wanted to learn, whether it was when I was training for the Rio Olympics, I took the year off from school, but I decided, hey, I want to learn guitar. So I really took lessons from someone. And that was when I started learning how to like really lift and get into strength and conditioning. And so I felt like I was learning on 2 other fronts, not just fencing. And that helped me have a really successful season that led into a really successful Olympics. But if you look at the, couple of years afterwards when I was training for Tokyo, maybe, 2017, 2018, I just finished college. I already knew how to do strength and conditioning. And yes, I was doing it, but I wasn't really learning as much. And then I stopped learning how to play guitar. So a lot of my day was kind of like it was all fencing and then, kind of vegging out and not really focused on anything else. And although I was fencing well, I was probably top 8 in the world. I definitely taken a backslide to when I was like number one in the world,
Yeah.
right? And whether that's coincidence or causation, it's hard to say, but I've seen it in other fencers that don't use the rest of their time really effectively or thoughtfully when they're not doing fencing at the same time.
It's interesting, like, when you're so competitive and you're so goal oriented and all these things, it's interesting how like you want to be challenged. For you, it's like when you have the free time, it's you don't want to like watch TV 10 hours or play video games 10 hours. You want to kind of it's almost like you want to be useful in a way. So see, I think the guitar and all the things that you were able to do the previous Olympics that you mentioned probably have helped you more and also keep you distracted a little bit from fencing in a healthy way. Because I feel like as much as we love the sport, and any athlete can say that, and any coach can say that, we do need our kind of time of completely different thing.
Downtime, yeah.
Yeah.
Downtime or something to disconnect so you can. That's the same with school and fencing. Like you cannot be only at school because then you're also gonna burn out. Like go do some advances and retreats until something starts making sense there to you as well. So that's part of life because again, kids can be very very busy, maybe sometimes too much, but then as you said it, there's got to be something to bring you balance to make sure that you're there for the long run.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, I fall into the trap of like just training and then vegging out and playing video games, right? But that's why I also say those were the moments where I actually, even though I was technically fully focused on fencing, those were the moments that I actually didn't think I was fencing as well as when I did do all these things on the side, whether it's school or learning something new or having an internship, right? And part of it is like the burnout aspect, and but B, I think part of it is because you are dedicating yourself to something else as well, you know you only have a limited amount of time for fencing, and so you make sure
More
and you work
productive.
a lot harder to be a lot more efficient in those moments, and you know that, like, you can't just make it up the next day, right? Like, "No, I have a certain amount of time dedicated each day to do this. It's limited, and I'm gonna make the best of it."
This is something that like I wouldn't ask many people because they're not what you are, but like you've always been extremely humble. You've always been down to earth. You have never changed from the moment we met you when you were like maybe 10, 12. I don't remember what was your age.
Six.
Same for your sister, same for
Yeah, I
your
think
parents.
6, yeah.
Yeah, six. And even the kids who meet you at the events, they always say, Alex is so nice. He's so approachable. So, how are you always so humble and so down to earth, and you never let your fame and success kind of get in your head?
I think first of all, I wouldn't consider myself famous by any means because fencing is a small sport and there are definitely a lot more people with a lot more fame out there. But I really have to kind of give credit to my parents for that because they always told me to approach fencing, you know, without like the fame in mind, right? Like it was just always about enjoying the sport and trying to build the passion and bring that passion to the next generation of fencers. So that's always been kind of the goal of mine, right? Like it's never been about the glory. Yes, of course, I have these certain goals that I want to hit, but that's just like for me. It's not to impress anyone. It's not to, you know, appease my parents. It's not to appease, my friends. It's because I want to do it. And ultimately, when that's how you approach your goals, even when you succeed, you always think that there's another thing you can do, right? So for me, I don't think my career is over. Yes, I've seen a lot of success, but you know, it's not like I'm like this incredible figure that has done everything, right? No, there's always something more you can do. And the way that's how I think about it. And B, right, like a part of fencing and being an elite level fencer is appreciating the community around you. And I would not be where I am today without like the training partners and the people at the club that helped me get here. And that includes a lot of people that, didn't go to the Olympics, that didn't necessarily get recruited to fence in the NCAA, that, even the fencers that are just going to be club fencers and enjoy the sport, but, spent their time to train with me, ask me how to fence, asked me to, answer questions that made me think thoughtfully, they all had a part of my journey. And it would be really disrespectful to treat them in a way that doesn't acknowledge them. And I just try and bring that same ethos to any person I meet in the fencing community because they have a role within their club and they have a role within USA Fencing or the, world fencing community um, that is probably important to someone. And it would be really, really high and mighty of me to ignore those kinds of contributions.
Yeah, because we do see a lot of athletes in general, like becoming completely like, I mean, you got to remember where you came from, who you are, and you're more, I mean, relatable because it's almost like what kind of example this gives to the next generation. Like, what if you succeed at something, you're not talking to certain people because they're not at your level or something? Because we always mention this for the kids at the academy that if somebody wins a medal at the academy, they're part of this success. They're part of this medal. I do know that they didn't have it put on everybody's neck, but they might have said something that helped that kid. They might have done a lunch in a way, like every single little thing. So we celebrate the kids as a general and the parents. We don't necessarily like this is the national champion, this, because I also feel this creates extremely unhealthy like environment because I don't believe in self-made thing because you always need people around you who are there to support you, whether you're up or whether you're down. Because I'm sure that like when you had your really, really not so great moments in fencing career, your family was there to help you. Your teammates were there. Whoever was there, that's part of the success too, because they were there for you. You weren't doing it on your own, right?
100%. And that's what my parents always say. It's like it takes a village to raise a child, right? And that's always the ethos that they've preached at their club. When someone has success, the whole club has success, right? Everyone had a part in that medal or whatever award. So, yeah, 100% agree.
So, what advice would you give the young fencers who really want to go for the long run, whether their dream is Olympics, World Championships, senior level, so they're pacing themselves and they don't have like the burnout?
I think the biggest piece of advice is just to remember where your passion comes from because I've seen so many fencers over the years lose focus of why they started fencing in the pursuit of what they're trying to pursue with fencing, right? You're gonna ask a lot of people as they get further and further in their careers, why are you still fencing? Or like, why do you like fencing? And a lot of times, like, well, I like it because I'm getting these results and stuff. And like, well, is that like why you started fencing? And they kind of look at me with this like, oh, I guess not. Look. And that's the thing that really, I think, makes things easier for you when things are difficult, right? Like when things are going wrong in your career, whether it's the results or injury or something else, just any kind of adversity, pinpointing why you're still doing this beyond the results is what has always helped me ground myself and continue when times are hard. When I see that, whether it's with a kid at our club or someone on the university team, that's how I respond to them. I'm like, hey, think about why you're doing this, right? Like whether it's community, whether it's to learn skills that will benefit you outside of the fencing strip, whether it is for the results to a certain degree sometimes. But like think about really why. And when you think about why and then also internalize it and accept it, that's when you're able to kind of let go of a lot of anxiety and really excel in the sport because it's it's that lack of acceptance within yourself and these like conflicting thoughts, right? Like you're doing it for the results, but you're not doing it for the stuff that you started fencing for or why you really enjoyed it in the first place. And then because of that inherent conflict, you're not accepting kind of the results are going to just be the results, right? Like that's what I told my whole fencing team this year is like, forget about the results. Like you can't really control the results sometimes, right? Whether you wake up on the wrong side of the bed or, you have an issue with the referee or you ate the wrong thing, you got sick, right? There are things that they're just out of your control when it comes to results. But what we can control is our effort and our preparation and our reasoning as to why we're doing this, right? The reasoning of why you continue to fence really affects your preparation and your training. It doesn't really affect your competition so much. Yes, on the day of, it might help or not help for a little bit, but that's what like drives your training on a day-to-day basis. So if you don't have that reasoning correct in your head, you can't expect your trainings to be as fruitful as you want them to be.
I always tell the parents and the kids at the club, no matter what your goals are in the sport, you got to remember why you do it. And I am always saying, like, I do know sometimes you're uncomfortable. Sometimes you feel like, oh my gosh, I don't want everybody to be watching me. But if you're staying at home and you're in your safe space, you will never grow. You will never do big things. And while you're out there and you're growing and this sport destroys you and shapes you, every sport does that. It destroys you and shapes you better. And it's almost like a diamond, right? And I'm like, you're going to do big things while kids at your age are behind the screens and they're not growing. And later on, they're going to understand the waste of time that they had in their life. Because it's not, the sports are not only for kids who want to go to Olympics. The sports is something absolutely necessary in everybody's life, whether you're talented or not. The proper posture, the way you can even run and this and that. It's like when we have fencers who've stopped fencing because after college, kids are like completely done. And they always call us as like, I never knew how much I will miss that. Because this kind of balance between workload and being active and being with like-minded people and going through ups and downs together. And I always tell the kids, like, the pain will be temporary. One day it's going to be done. But that sport helped you so much, regardless what you do, like in life, post sports. So what keeps you excited and motivated to keep competing at that level?
A few things. A, just my love of the sport, right? Like, again, I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't say that that was a big reason why I continue to fence. It's again not just always chasing results. It's about really enjoying and loving the sport and loving the lessons I learn even to this day, whether it's through coaching my students or through fencing and learning more at the club, right? There's always something to learn in the sport. And that's one thing I think I really love. It's just like I love learning and fencing is a good vehicle for that. And then also, obviously, I have goals that I want to accomplish too, right? Like, again, from the beginning, I always said I want to be Olympic champion one day, and that's something that I haven't accomplished just yet. So obviously, I'm going to continue chasing that goal. But, ultimately, it boils down to my love of the sport, right? Because even at this juncture, I feel very happy about my career and what I've been able to accomplish from a results perspective. But really, like the relationships I've made, the lessons I've learned, the places I've traveled to, the experiences I've had, that's all shapes me to be a better person. And, I feel I feel very happy with what I've accomplished. I'm just a really competitive person. So I think there's always something more I can do.
Sky's the
So
limit.
I'm guess, Alex, once you're done with the senior level, you're gonna jump into the veteran level, but I don't think anybody's gonna beat you.
No, 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 no. That's one thing I have decided is that I'm never going to fence veterans fencing.
Don't never say never.
Never say never, right?
I'm very confident that I will likely never fence veterans fencing because for me, it would be so hard to go from Olympic level and then seeing myself and try and do things where I know my body used to be able to do it and it no longer can. But I will be able to keep my competitiveness up in different ways, whether it's playing pickup basketball or, just suiting up with the students every so often. I'm not going to fence veterans, but I'll probably still suit up with some of the fencers on the team or at the club occasionally.
Because after fencing, competitive fencing, then can be coming. You're already doing the coaching.
Yeah, yeah.
You can translate this through your fencers.
Actually, being a coach is never the same because you have different kids, different age groups. Yeah, they go to college, but then you always have another challenge, another challenge. And I'm always joking with the kids in the club when I talk to somebody, I'm like, you're my biggest challenge yet. And they're just laughing because I feel like if you're competitive and you achieve it all the time, it gets boring. You want something to trigger you, something to tell you you cannot do it. It's far, it's this and that. And I think that's why I think we talk with Chris a lot about it. Like, I don't see us doing anything else. I mean, we can do addition to what we do, maybe in different level. I don't know, but I don't think I cannot be a coach. I was like, maybe I can become a coach for NBA. That's a good challenge for me. I mean, I don't know much of the rules, but I'm sure that I can apply what I know from fencing. So NBA, if you want to hire a coach that has no idea, I like the challenge. Yeah, something like that. I think that's going to be funny and challenging. So Chris had one question that he wants to make sure that he doesn't miss asking you.
Yeah. So my question is, how is it being a boss?
Uh, it's a little strange, it. it feels a little surreal because not only am I a boss, I'm like a boss at a program that I used to fence in. I'm in the office of my previous coach, the coach who recruited me. So it definitely was a little strange. It took a little getting used to within the first, year. And then it became really strange when I had to hire assistant coaches, um, because I'd never, hired people in the past, and I had to go through a whole interview process, and I had to develop my own process to evaluate the people I wanted to bring in. Um, and even to this day, they joke around, like, I try and treat them like my equals, right? They're people who I couldn't do their jobs, right? I'm not a Sabre coach and I'm not an epee coach, right? So I can't do what they're doing out there. And but they're always joking, like, Alex, you're the boss, you tell us what to do, and we got it. And I'm like, I don't like the way you say that, like, I've always been someone who's, like, very collaborative, very try to be humble. So getting used to, like, actually being the boss and being like, "Hey, I need this, this, and this done," even the hiring alone was, like, something pretty insane because I had to come up with my own interview process, what I define as success, what I think is important for our program, and just really evaluate like a coaching talent based on all these different parameters that I was responsible for.
Yeah.
So that was like the big wake up call for me. And then now, I just try and be as good of a boss as possible, right? I give them the keys to do whatever they're gonna do, right? I'm not here to tell them how to be an epee or saber coach, right? Like, if I have comments on how I think things need to be run from, like, a university perspective or like, feedback I get from the kids, I'll run it back by them, but ultimately, they're the experts. There's no reason for me to get in the way of what they're doing, and I think that's why you see a lot of, success and growth out of not just the foil program at Stanford, but, like, the saber and epee programs are, hopefully being elevated as well.
Because I do like the fact that, like, you don't want to kind of tell somebody who is completely different field, like, I mean, you're the pro foil, but like there's a little different things in saber and a lot of different things in ep, and you let them do their thing. And of course, I think for something to be successful, from our personal experience, it's about the teamwork. And one of our coaches, David Timofeyev, he's always saying, like, boss. He calls me boss, and I hate this. And I'm like, if you call me one more time boss, I'll fire you for that. I am not your boss. We are a team. And everything, every success we have is because of you and everybody else that has been part. It's not me. Yeah, I'm paying the rent, but I'm not your boss. You're your own boss, because you can leave anytime. You can come back anytime. If it's like, and that's the approach that I believe in. The same thing with the students. Your teammates, nobody's better. I mean, somebody can win a medal, but when they come to the club, they're the same level. You're the same level as everybody else. Be humble, be a good person, respect others. And that's pretty much the approach that we believe in.
And it's not gonna get one fencer to win 14 bouts, right?
Yeah. Well, ultimately, I mean, I totally agree, right? And again, that's kind of why I don't like it when they call me boss. It makes me feel uncomfortable because,
Mhm.
you know, they're the boss of their aspect, right? And I brought them in because I thought they are accountable and they're capable to be their own boss in certain ways, right? Like, yes, I know that technically I'm their boss, and yes, I do set the greater
Mhm.
schedule, right? There are some things that are like just like you, right? I have more responsibility on my plate, but ultimately we're a team, right? They affect the team in a lot of ways, not even in their own weapon, but across the board of through the other weapons, through their interactions with the rest of the team as well. So it would be really selfish for me to say that, like, I'm the boss and they're just like my coaches. It's like, no, we're a team. We work together. Inevitably one day when Saber and Epee have results that are better than foil, right? I'm gonna give them their fair share, but I also know they're gonna treat me like, "Hey, we're a team, like, like you had a hand in this as much as I did in certain ways, maybe not from a pure coaching perspective, right? But in the same ways that they had a hand in, how our foil kids did at the NCAAs this year, everyone's gonna have a hand in everything because we're really cultivating an environment and a full team, not just individual fencers.
So if you were not fencing, let's just say at young age you pick different sport or different thing, what do you think you could have been and be really good at?
I think my love of sport kind of translates to both skiing and basketball. Now, basketball, I'm all right, but I'm not sure I'd be able to make it as one of the 500 best players on the planet to be in the NBA. But I do think I could have been a darn good skier. I'm pretty good skier even right now. And, again, to be a professional in anything is really, really difficult. And I'm not going to discount anything a professional skier does by, saying that I could have done it, but I would have at least liked to try. So I think that's where my passion would have been. I would probably would have put it into skiing.
Beyond the medals and the titles, how do you want to be remembered as an athlete and as a person?
I just want to be remembered as someone who gave back to sport as much as I took from it, right? I took a lot from the sport just from lessons and obviously a lot of accolades and success uh, in those ways. But ultimately, I want to be remembered as someone who was able to take those lessons and give it back to the next generation, to give back to kids that, want a shot of not just fencing, but doing well in life, right? Like, that's why I love coaching at Stanford so much because there's so many, all the kids, regardless of the current skill level, they all are very much like minded to how I was in college. These are all really bright kids that really want to study and be really contributing members to their society in a lot of ways, go on to do different roles and different jobs that are really important. And for me, that's where I get a lot of joy because I feel like the lessons I teach them through fencing can really help guide them a lot of ways through their life and their career at Stanford. And I also am able to teach them a lot of things about their career at Stanford as someone who went there myself too. So helping guide them through that process and teaching them lessons on and off the strip, I think that's a big part of what I want to be remembered for is just giving back.
I do remember when the fencing program had some issues to be closed, right, in Stanford. You were fighting like no other for that program. The program is back stronger and better than ever, and now you're the head coach. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I never expected that to be a thing. I never expected to be in this position. It really came kind of out of the blue for me. Ultimately, when they announced the cuts, I just want to bring the program back and help in any way I could. So my focus was just, securing the legacy of Stanford fencing, not just for myself. Obviously, I had a personal investment because it felt really like a slap in the face to what everything I'd achieved for them and and the way they were able to use my name to kind of when I've won 3 Olympic medals and stuff like that. But ultimately what I was more upset about was for the next generation of people that are not going to be able to have the same experience that I did. And that's why I was so passionate because I really loved every second I was at Stanford. Those 4 years are 4 of the best years I've had in my life. And I want other generations of fencers to be able to experience it. So that's why I fought tooth and nail, not just for fencing, but for all 11 sports that were affected by the cuts to be reinstated because everyone that I talked to that come through those programs had felt very similar to me, right? They loved their time. They thought that they learned so much from being on a team at Stanford, and they also hated thinking about, oh, we're gonna miss a generation or generations of, whether it's rowers, volleyball players, fencers, people who dedicated their life to the sport, really want to go to Stanford because of, whether it's the coaching, the school, whatever it might be. Um, and they're now not going to get an opportunity to do that and do something they were almost, not necessarily promised, but that, was very much an option for them in the past. So that's kind of how I treat coaching nowadays too, right? And that's why I think I was so passionate about getting the job there. Ultimately, like at the beginning of the job hunt, I was just there to kind of help find the next person because I was like, hey, I just want to make sure you choose the right person for the job. And ultimately it kind of changed into, well, I actually think I'm the best person for the job. And that's because I'm so passionate about, you know, having kids come through the program and giving them not just the exact same experience I got, but hopefully an even better experience than I got. And I already said Stanford's 4 of the best years of my life. It can't get that much better from that. But I'm trying to do my best to make sure if I can do a better job that I am and I'm giving them a better experience than I got.
That was very important too, saving those sports and bringing those sports back for the whole fencing community. And I just hope that everybody hears this message right now, because if our sport gets cut out of a very good and amazing program, that's a huge problem for the whole community. Huge. Because then, if one university says, "Oh, that's okay to cut this sport or 11 sports," then the others be like, "Oh, we can do the same." And now that kind of helps secure everything. And now we see how the programs are getting expanded. More schools offer fencing programs, scholarships. Now the men and the women will get also separated, which would make it more even field for
Yeah.
everyone. So it's really, this is really important. And we just hope again also with the international fencing, we don't get shot in the foot and say fencing won't be part of the Olympics, because that's going to be another crucial thing for everyone.
Yeah, but I also feel like I just hope more people are brave to speak the way you do, because actually everybody feels the same way, but they're afraid to speak for their own reasons. Probably you kind of get what I'm saying. They're afraid of not being fired and so on and so forth. And but sometimes, you gotta risk it all to make this huge change, because we do know that it's extremely important for the next generations. And I don't understand. I just hope the colleges understand how valuable every sport is. Just because they're not fan of certain sports, it doesn't mean that they have to cut it, because there's a millions of other who love the sport and enjoy the sport. And I do think that sports are keeping the kids from doing something dumb, and we want to keep them healthy and out of the streets. And I just hope that the right people like hear the message and just keep the sports, grow more the colleges with the sports, because of course everybody has different interests. It's almost like you cutting the chemistry program in the college or something else. Why would you? There are incredible people who love that program, and they're going to do incredible things in their life and in our lives with the chemistry that they learn in college. So I hope, I mean, that's a good that you start rolling the ball and some other people kind of start following, your lead. Is there anything that you've never mentioned in any interview that people don't know about you or they don't suspect about it? I mean, you said about the guitar and you said about the skiing and stuff. Is there anything that people have no idea you love and you have passion for?
I'm not sure. I mean, I feel like I'm a pretty open book, whether it's an interview or a podcast or just like chatting with people. I pretty much give what you see is what you get. Like you pretty much get a full picture of who I am. So I'm not sure there's anything that in particular that I'm thinking of that they don't know. But I don't know. Like I got a
You like the
cat,
Pokemon
right? Like
cards, right?
I got a cat.
The
Yeah,
cat. So he's a cat person.
That's one of 11.
yeah. Exactly. A converted cat person. My girlfriend got me very into being a cat person. I used to be a very much a dog person. I still am a dog person, but love cats too. But I don't know. Yeah, what you
You
see
like
is what you get.
Pokemon cards, right?
I do, I do enjoy busting Pokemon cards. The thrill of ripping a pack and not being sure what you're gonna get is something I always. It's definitely a dopamine hit to the head. But yeah, I don't know. Like I kind of pride myself in being an open book, and whether it's talking to recruits or talking to a random fencer, young fencer, or someone at the club. I try not to hide who I am because I think that's the best way to operate. Just like wear your heart on your sleeve, and people can make decisions on how they feel about you, and that way they can make the best decision possible because they know who you are. So, you know, you may not like me, but at least you know who I am.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to add at the end or to shout out to anybody? Anything you want to add?
I mean, first of all, I want to shout out my parents and my family, my girlfriend, because, I'm not here without the support that they've given me. My parents and sister have been there ever since day one of me fencing. And they, as you can hear through this podcast, my parents have instilled a lot of the traits that helped me be successful from a super young age, right? Whether it's mentality, skills, obviously, through my dad being my coach, and just like a way of thinking about life that I think is really important. But then my girlfriend for keeping me grounded and being endlessly supportive through the last like 6 years. And, I know my fencing career can be really difficult to deal with as at times as a partner, but she's been super supportive the whole time. But lastly, like I want to thank everyone who's been a part of the ride, whether you've been at the club, whether you're a teammate of mine that helped me train at any point in my life, or the current Stanford team that made my transition into coaching so much easier than I thought it was going to be. I don't think I try and heap as much praise on them as humanly possible because I could have stepped into a coaching position and, encountered a team that really didn't want to change, didn't want to believe in what I was trying to bring, right? Because they were recruited by a different set of people. They had a different system going on ahead of time, previously, right? There's no reason for them to want to do it the way I want to do it, but I give them so much credit because not only do they tackle every challenge that I presented them, they did it, without being defiant, right? They might have questions, they might be, they might complain a couple of times, but they understand the reasoning, especially when I explain it. And, yes, everyone's going to complain about morning practice here and there, or me working them pretty hard, but they've all bought into the system that I'm trying to bring. And, they're all really, really good kids and good-hearted people. So they've made my life and transition into coaching just such a pleasure. And there's not another group of kids that I would have wanted to kind of embark on this journey with from the start.
Yeah, I think you're on the right place at the right time with the right people because the kids do love you because we have students there, we had students there, and they're very happy with you. So except the lifting,
Yeah, exactly.
Alex, make them lift. We
Oh,
gotta
of
get the
course. So that's not going to stop.
yeah,
Just because they
get the
complain doesn't mean I'm going to change.
You gotta
exactly
make them do something besides fencing.
besides fencing. Yeah,
I think every successful coach's job isn't necessarily to build the best fencers or the best basketball players or whatever. It's to push their students out of their comfort zones. And when you do that, that's when, results will come. That's when
Good
you'll
things
get
will
the best
happen.
out of them, right? So if I was just results oriented, I don't think I would have the same success as I had, this year. It was just really pushing a process and pushing them out of their comfort zones, pushing them to believe that, it's all worth it and that they can be a better person and better fencer out of the process. And when we did that and I removed the expectations, I was like, hey, we do this because we want to be the best version of ourselves, not because we want the results, right? The results, again, we have very little control over sometimes. But we do this because this is how you should prepare for life, right? If you're going to do something, you do it 100%. You never leave anything on the table. You never have any regrets as to like how you wanted to prepare for a project, a competition or whatever. Project might fail. Fencing result may not come. But if you gave everything you got, at least you can look back and be like, hey, I prepared as best as humanly possible. I did everything I can control, right? And so when we removed the expectations and just did preparation based on what we want internally from fencing, results naturally came. And so and ultimately that's the way I've always tackled fencing, the way my parents taught me. So that I've seen the way the results you can get from that. I think that's the healthiest way from a mindset perspective to tackle fencing and anything you want to be serious in. So yeah, I'm going to continue to keep pushing these kids out of their comfort zones. And the more when they complain, I know I'm doing my job right because it is out of their comfort zones. And
Yes.
then when at the end of the day, they're like, I was complaining, but I know why I'm doing this. And I somewhat agree. That's when I know I'm doing my job right.
yeah. Do you want to ask him anything else?
Not asking, but I want to wish again the Stanford program and you to again to reach the highest heights in the NCAA, and you're on the right track as we can see, and then hopefully it's gonna happen sooner than later.
Yeah, and this is
Thank
not
you
gonna
so
be the last
much.
time. This is not gonna be the last time you're on the podcast because I'm sure that
Yeah.
like in a year we'll be like, tell me about those results. What happened then?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
No, I love to be back on here and hopefully with even better news than this time around. So thanks for having me on. It's really a pleasure. I mean, you guys have been, a part of my fencing journey longer than I think most people would expect, right? I think, if you didn't know something about me, this is probably a learning experience in the sense that like, how did Alex know Chris and Setsi? Well, I've known them that I was like 5, 6 years old before I started fencing because they come over and referee for my dad. So, if anything, that's the surprise I have for people on the podcast.
so thank you again for being a guest. We wish you nothing but the best. See you soon at the NAC to chat more.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Thank you.
and hopefully that Olympic dream is gonna happen. We're gonna cheer for you.
Appreciate it. Well,
Thank
thank
you,
you so much
Alex.
for having me on. Good luck with the preparation for the new season. And again, I'll see you at the NAC.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.